Now to our own Queen of Business, Kate Moody. The debate between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen on Wednesday evening outlined their differing views on the economy, amongst other issues. You can say that again, Kate.
Well, yes, Mark, we were watching it together, weren't we? And we know that the cost of living crisis that's affecting so many French households and businesses was the first issue that was really addressed in that debate. The candidates themselves outlining those starkly different approaches. Marine Le Pen wants to slash sales tax on petrol and energy from 20 to 5.5%, and she says she would get rid of sales tax altogether on about 100 essential items. Emmanuel Macron, meanwhile, said he would extend his government's freeze on electricity and gas bills and extend more financial aid to the most vulnerable households. Let's get some insight into all that from Daniela Ordonez. She's the chief French economist at Oxford Economics in Paris. Thanks for being with us today. Let's start with Marine Le Pen's headline proposal, reducing VAT. From an economics point of view, is that an effective way to help French people who are struggling?
Well, it's a catch-eye proposal and quite populist. But from an purely economic point of view, the effects would be very limited on the economy, mainly because these kind of measures are not targeted enough for people that actually need more money. And in fact, reducing the VAT will have the same impact for the poorest and for the richest, not targeting those that really need. It is to bear in mind that we are exiting a period of COVID, of lockdowns, where savings have been accumulated by households, and especially by richest households. So the savings they might make by this reduction in VAT might also go to savings instead of consumption, and so not necessarily to economic activity. So the economic output would be rather limited, whereas the measure would cost heavily on public finances. So it is not a very useful or impactful measure, nor for the economy, nor for the wider consumers.
And what about the steps that have been outlined by the incumbent president seeking his re-election there? Is that a more constructive way, in your view, of addressing this cost of living crisis?
Well, I think it is. He has the experience of already being in power, but especially his measures are short-term, and we have to bear in mind that today we are in short-term shocks, something that will fade in some time. So he's proposing to give some energy checks, for example, or direct transfers to households that are more in need of these incomes right now, because supporting purchasing power and offsetting the negative impact of high inflation is important right now to support the economy. However, these inflationary pressures will sometimes fade. We expect notably energy prices to fall markedly next year once international events appease. So at that moment, it won't be necessary anymore to have these kind of supported measures that are very costly in the long term with a minor economic impact in the economy. So yes, they are more technical and more thoughtful and more adapted to the current situation.
Now, you've published some research that suggests that Le Pen's main economic proposals would actually hurt France's economy, potentially reducing GDP by as much as 3 percentage points. Why?
Well, the most problematic proposal she makes is reducing the retirement age to 60 years old, cut the retirement age back to 60 years old. This concretely means that the labor force available in France will be mechanically shorter. We will have less people available and willing to work. So mechanically it means we have less resources, and then we can just produce less. So the production will mechanically fall by that. But so this is the most important measure affecting long-term growth. On the other hand, her proposals draw a chronic fiscal deficit. Even if some of her measures will support consumption and investment, the other ones will be rather direct and with low, what we call fiscal multipliers, meaning they are not supportive for the economy, but at the same time will generate a chronic deficit and very high debt. With at the end of the story means the French, the taxpayers that will be paying for that spreads and yields in financial markets could soar, thus impacting the economy again.
We heard a lot about the cost of living and pension reform actually in Wednesday's debate. Were there any economic policy areas that you were surprised didn't get more focus?
Yes, more than economic surprises was the long-term view. I think this was a debate that was very much concentrated in short-term issues, and this is what was demanded by the French, for which purchasing power and current inflation is the first worry. However, it was hard to have a clear idea of what are the long-term projects and long-term visions for the French economy for both candidates in this case. So something very revealing was the debate around climate change and the green transition, which was very short in time during the debate, without very deep digging, and especially not opening the arms to the left voters that voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and that are the actual ones that will decide what will happen on Sunday. So I was quite surprised that climate change was not a bigger topic, and that the proposals were not clearer or even more innovative. The second issue that I was surprised is public finances, of course. Debt or deficit were not mentioned by any candidate, despite the fact that until now, or in the 2017 debate and campaign, these were important issues. Having sustainable fiscal finances are still important and should not be forgotten. It seems that there is a wide consensus that the state could run fiscal deficits forever, that will be financed by the ECB and accepted by the European Commission, whereas this is not acquired at all. We are in an environment of high inflation where the margin of maneuver of the ECB is very limited, and financing forever fiscal deficit is just not something sustainable. So I was surprised this was not addressed more during the debate.
Daniela, we just have 1 minute left, and I want to ask you, what do you think the biggest economic challenge is going to be for whoever is elected president on Sunday?
Definitely, I think it's social unrest, which is not necessarily an economic challenge, but it will be passing reforms and continuing the reform agenda in a very tough social ambience. So it is clear that whoever wins on Sunday, it will not have a strong popular base or a strong popular support. And our fear is that social unrest will become chronic, similar to what we saw in 2018 with the Gilets jaunes crisis. And this is something very likely will happen because reforms are needed, but the situation socially and politically is very fragmented.
Daniela Ordonez from Oxford Economics, thanks so much for joining us on France 24 today. And Mark, of course, we'll have much more on those and other issues throughout the evening and in the next few days.
Indeed, Kate, thank you very much indeed. Kate, bringing us all developments politically, economically in the run-up to this crucial second round of voting on Sunday. Kate, thank you very much indeed.